Welcome to Lantern Voices, a podcast by Lantern Publishing and Media. The opinions and information expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of Lantern Publishing and Media Incorporated. Welcome to another episode of Lantern Voices. It's great having you here with us. My name is Louisa. I'm your host for this episode with author Christine Mott. Christine's new book, Free Bird, Flaco's Dreams Take Flight, is about a beloved New York City personality, Flaco the Free Owl. It is a children's book with beautiful watercolor illustrations by California-based Ofra Layla Isler. Besides being a Lantern author, Christine Mott is also part of Lantern's advisory board. She's a Wall Street-trained attorney who advocates for people, animals, and the environment. Her work has taken her from environmental protection groups and animal protection causes to legislation to stop animal cruelty and protect the environment. Free Bird is Christine's first children's book. As a native New Yorker with 2 children, she dedicated this book to her kids and all future animal rights activists in the world. So get comfy and let's start our conversation with Christine Mott. Hi, Christine. Welcome to Lantern Voices. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. We love having you here in the podcast today. I want to ask you, what made you decide to write a book about Flaco the Owl? You are a native New Yorker, and Flaco is a much beloved personality of the city. Has this connection had anything to do with your choice for Flaco?
Sure. So, for those who are watching who aren't familiar with Flaco's story, Flaco was an owl who famously escaped the Central Park Zoo after living his whole life in solitary confinement. And his story just exploded in the world, and he became the world's most famous bird. I wanted to write a children's book to celebrate his amazing story as he followed his dreams so bravely, escaping the zoo and learning to fly and doing all the things he never had the chance to do. I, of course, want to captivate and entertain children. But for me, it was also really important that this book carries a message. And to me, that was helping children connect with the feelings of Flaco and therefore the feelings of all animals, understanding that, we might be different in many ways, but in ways that really matter, we're the same. We all feel, and that children should care about the feelings of animals.
I when I was reading, I was crying by the end of the book. And you see, even the illustrations, like the one you have in your background right now, is just like you want to protect that bird so bad.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing. It's, like millions of people around the world, I watched Flaco's story as it unfolded and, we all cheered for him. He was really the quintessential New Yorker, this little guy who, against all odds, is able to somehow follow his dreams, achieve the things he's for so long waited to enjoy. So everybody wants to root for him. And that's the thing. It's such a basic thing that you can identify with an animal's feelings. I think in a lot of ways, humans always tried to claim superiority, in the animal kingdom. We are the strongest. We are the smartest. We build buildings. We do all these things. So much so that I think sometimes we forget those very obvious ways that we are the same, right? And that one of the most basic things is in our feelings. And Flaco's story is really an opportunity for to reconnect with that. And, maybe some people are able to still have that connection with dogs, cats, other animals that are in their day-to-day life. And it might be harder for people to connect with wild animals, an owl. How often does someone think like, oh, yes, I can relate to an owl? But with Flaco, everybody could. Everybody understood. He just wanted to be free. Look at this owl. He was a Eurasian eagle owl, which is the largest species of owl in the world. These owls have a wingspan of over 6 feet wide. They have huge territories in their natural habitat, Eastern Europe, mountainous territories of where they would fly every day, hunting for prey. And for Flaco, who was this owl who was born in captivity and spent his whole life in a solitary exhibit, which has been described as about the size of a bus stop. It was no life for an owl. He couldn't even fly in his enclosure. He had this perch made out of a fake tree branch, painting of some mountains in the background, and And that was it. And so for 12 years, he just watched the world go by. And in the story, we talk about sparrows coming to visit. And I think that probably was a real thing. He was out in this mesh enclosure. And so he could see the wild birds flying. And here he was stuck here for all this time as people came and gawked at him. And that's all he had until one fateful day or night, I should say, when suddenly a hole appeared in his enclosure. He climbed out and he used his wings for the first time. It flew away. Such an incredible thing that and he couldn't even fly in his enclosure. And somehow he had, the interest and the bravery to try to do that. And I think that's something kids and adults can really connect with.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking about pictures I've seen at a time and how initially some folks were concerned about will he be able to survive because he spent so much time inside a little like jail. And then he turned out fine. And I remember seeing some photos of people, especially people that lived around Central Park, saying that he will come by the window, be like, "Hi, what are you doing?" and just be very curious. It's so adorable.
Oh, I know. There are so many amazing, beautiful photos that were captured by, bird photographers or even just people. I think there was a woman, a playwright who, yeah, to your point,
Yeah.
what looked out her window and said, "Oh my goodness, Flaco is peeking into my window." Um, to show some of that in that playfulness in the illustrations. And shout out to my illustrator, Ofra Layla Isler. She did such an amazing job bringing my vision to life with her beautiful watercolor illustrations of Flaco. So thank you to Oprah. Yeah, Flaco really he left the Central Park Zoo out, after he was out of his exhibit. He stayed there for a while, but then he really started to explore the city. And so he was cited in so many interesting places, showing that he really was following his dreams. He wanted to do more than his life was limited to for so long. And I think so many people were able to connect with that. Those who said, he's like an immigrant who came to the city and had to, toil away for so long, yearning for his dream, and finally he got it. Or people who, live in teeny tiny apartments in New York City, finally getting out to explore. There are so many ways that I think people could connect with him, and that's so critically important, I think, because if we look around our worlds, I mean, there are so many Flacos, right? There are all the animals that are in zoos, in tiny enclosures that will be there forever and are facing the same thing that Flaco did and probably won't ever have that opportunity to spring free. But there are animals that are used in so many other ways in our society, in industry, animals in agriculture, animals in other forms of entertainment, whether it's circuses, or, you know, animals in puppy mills or other industrialized farming to create the supply chain for animals in pet stores. All of those animals, like Flaco, want to be out and enjoying their life. And, you know, if we can cause people to connect and understand that very basic concept that animals are like us, I think that's how we start to create change in the world for animals.
This is particularly challenging when you're talking about a children's book. I had a conversation for a previous episode of this podcast with Cheryl Moss and Nuke Frolic, who are the other children authors, two of the other children authors that we have at Lantern. And one of the things that we discussed was children are very empathetic toward animals kind of naturally in a way, but the ones that are making the decisions about books to buy and what they should read are their parents, the adults. So when you're writing a book like that and like choosing a story such as Flaco, like what is the message that you want to pass for kids, yes, but also for the adults that are making this choice of the book that their child should read?
Great question. I mean, for me, I am a mom. I have two little girls. And so I'm always reading books to them. And I have a whole collection of books that I want to read to them that have, messages that I care about that are important to me about being kind to animals, to people, to our earth. I think it's a real challenge to write a book that is going to convey a message, but also be a book that children, parents, caregivers want to read. I've had the experience of buying and attempting to read other books in this genre to my children, and just to be honest, had to stop because some of them just weren't able to make that leap. They came from the right place and were wanting to share a message, a very important message. But I think a lot of times what gets lost is that appeal to the children, appeal to the adults who want to read a warm and fuzzy bedtime story, or a story that's going to feel uplifting and keep them engaged. For me, that was the kind of tightrope I had to walk of how do you make this a story that children and parents want to read and yet achieve that important message. So I hope that I did that. I guess first message in the book is about following your dreams and being inspired. And I think the secondary message, or when I think of it as kind of planting the seeds, is how do we treat animals? Was Flaco, when he was in the zoo, was that the right place for him? Was that where he wanted to be, or was he happier being free? And I pose those questions in a very, I guess, open way for kids and adults, because I think the last thing we want to do is hit people over the head with a message, because I think that's where people become resistant and don't want to be preached to. So I wanted to really format this in a way that would get people starting to think about this issue. And I think it can trickle down, as we've been talking about, to other issues related to animals in the world, but do it in a really gentle way that we're not going to have somebody just shut the book and say no, or not even buy it because, oh gosh, this is going to be some book that's going to make me feel sad and guilty. I want this to be a positive, uplifting experience for the kids and the adults.
Inspiration, not guilt.
Exactly.
That's very nice. We're talking about the hard topics that this book tackles. And it was written before Flaco passing, right?
No, I actually started to write it days after he passed.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And what was that did that had anything to do with the need to write this book?
It did. I remember reading, there's a beautiful, I call it an obituary of Flaco that was written in the New York Times. And that itself was just such a beautiful tribute to Flaco. But what really, I think, touched me were the hundreds and hundreds of messages in the comment section on that article. And it just showed all these people who really did connect with him. There were so many things, said, fly free, Flaco, you're free now. It really was a very visible demonstration of people challenging maybe the status quo. Most people, like myself, grew up going to zoos and think like, I love animals, and that's why I go to zoos to support the animals. And Flaco's story, I think, made so many people challenge that belief that they had, that the zoo was the right place for him. And Flaco showed us that it wasn't. He wanted to be great, and this was his opportunity to do that. So to me, feeling so moved and happy, and I mean, I was so sad that he passed, but I felt so happy that he had the opportunity to live his life for 1 year for the first time as an owl. That was his first time he got to fly, the first time he got to hunt and do all of the natural behaviors. So it was such a bittersweet moment, and I didn't want it to just pass. I felt like his legacy really needed to carry on. And for me, I think planting the seeds of compassion in the minds of children is one of the most important things we can do, period. Because if we can create a next generation of children who are leading with compassion for animals, for people, that's basically the root of all of our issues in the world today. If we could only all be more loving and peaceful. So I really wanted to write a children's book, and not necessarily a book for adults, but I do think that any adult that's reading this book will hear that same message loud and clear. And I hope that that seed of compassion will also grow in the hearts and minds of those adults who read the book too.
When we're talking to children and we're writing for children, there are kids inside every adult. So sometimes it's more effective to present a product that's directed to children, to adults, to pass, especially when it's a hard message. Back in Brazil, in my hometown, when I was working in a research I did with kids about gender perceptions in media for children, particularly, I had to find a way to present the results of this research back to the kids because they were the ones who were such an active participation. Like I would not have been able to do that research without the kids themselves. So when I was presenting to my professors and everybody, they were like, what are you doing for the kids? Because they're not going to read a 300-page dissertation on it. And I was
Right.
like, you're so right. So I ended up coming up with a stop motion to basically introduce, like, this is what was said, this is the interpretation we got, and everything in a very child appropriate language. And the kids, maybe they saw it, maybe they didn't, because I had to share with the teachers and the parents. It's their decision if the kids are going to see that material or not. But I saw so many of my fellow researchers and my friends and my family saying, oh, now I understand what you were researching all those years because they saw a product that was directed to kids. And I have age gap siblings. My siblings are way younger than me. And I remember getting the books and learning so much about the world with them, with children's books and with children's movies and shows. So hopefully, your book, when parents sit down to read with their kids, they're also going to get impacted, even if it was directed for the younger generation.
Absolutely. I really hope that too. And, thinking back, to my childhood and books that I read that were able to walk that line of, again, presenting a message and doing it in a way that is age appropriate and something that is digestible for children and adults. Those are some books that just still to this day are in my heart and in my mind. And so I'm really hoping that this becomes one of those books that the kids can really remember and guide them as they grow and for the adults too. Absolutely.
Do you love new books? Do you need more titles about veganism, animal rights, and climate activism on your bookshelf? Then go to lanternpm.org and check out all our books and ebooks available for purchase. You can find anything from beautiful illustrated picture books that introduce children to the values of compassion for our fellow animals, to thoroughly researched nonfiction books that give you all the facts to help you live a healthy vegan life. Go to lanternpm.org and explore all of our books today. My next question is in regards to Flaco's passing that we were just talking about. He lived his last year as a free owl. However, the city was a very hostile environment. It is for humans, it's very much more for non-human animals. So I was wondering, I know you were a lawyer, you work with animal rights professionally, not just as an author. I was wondering if you know or you're aware of, or if you have any ideas of what we could do legal wise or urban planning wise to make the city safer for our fellow animals.
Absolutely. Well, one of the beautiful things that came as part of Flaco's legacy is a push for a group of bills before New York City Council called Flaco's Laws. One of those bills is actually already passed, and that was one to replace the use of rat poison with birth control for rats.
Oh, that came up because of Flaco. I didn't know.
So yes, Flaco passed away after enjoying a year of freedom when he collided with a glass window on one of the high rises in New York. There was an autopsy of Flaco, and there were found to be high levels of rodenticide in his body because he was, preying on rats and pigeons who inevitably became poisoned by the use of arsenic and other poisons in the city. So happily, yes, one of the three bills has already passed. They're going to pilot a new program where they stop using these poisons and try to use birth control for these so-called pest animals. I think that's absolutely thrilling and such amazing kind of cutting edge legislation. There are two other critical bills that are part of Flaco's laws, and those are new mandates regarding construction of new buildings in the city so that they have bird safe glass. So birds often cannot tell the difference between transparent glass and air. And so Flaco's fate is the fate of sadly millions of birds in the world where they are trying to migrate and they crash into glass. It's so sad. And it's such a an easy thing to fix because, we have so many new buildings, lots of construction. It's as simple as using bird safe glass that has elements included in the glass that makes it obvious to birds that it is glass and not air. And for those of you at home who already, have your windows installed, there's some wonderful decals that you can get from the Audubon Society. And they're just these clear little window clings that go on, and that's enough for birds to be able to differentiate your glass windows from air and to prevent bird strikes at your own home. So I encourage you to get those. I have them, and they really do work. So the bird safe glass is one of the Flaco's laws that we're still trying to pass, and the last is reduction in light use at night, because that's also something that's really detrimental to migratory birds and can kind of confuse them and cause some of them to be basically stuck in a loop and just fly until exhaustion, until they fall down and die of heart attack or stress. So that's another push that we're trying to achieve, this package of Flaco's laws. And I hope that with continued outreach, we'll get these other bills passed. But again, that's one city. We have the rest of the world and people on an individual level. And there's so many things that you can do, like having at your own home these window clings, not using pesticides in your own garden at home because it's hurting. It inevitably goes up the food chain. You're trying to poison bugs. Those bugs get eaten by the birds, and little birds get eaten by bigger birds. And soon we're poisoning so many animals. And that's definitely contributed so much to the decline of so many wildlife species. And then, of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the other elephant in the room, which is, if you care about biodiversity loss, one of the largest contributors to that is, of course, industrialized animal farming. We clear so many thousands of acres of rainforest and other precious wild areas to be cleared for cattle grazing and other intensive farming uses. So, of course, going back to personal decisions, you can take a hard look at what you're doing on a personal level, the choices you make, and the products that you consume and buy, because those always have an impact on wildlife.
Of course. Yes. We are people who are listening to us, they know we're a vegan publisher. We are a podcast. So we are always going to support the vegan lifestyle, the vegan life as a choice. It's better for everybody, for animals, for humans, for the environment.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned, so my background is I am an attorney. This is my first children's book, but I've worked a lot in the space of animal law, and specifically was the chair of the Animal Law Committee of the New York City Bar Association, which is the first animal law committee of any bar association in the United States, and
Nice.
has a history of prolific writing and lobbying of all sorts of legislation on a local level, but also state and federal legislation to help animals. So let's say for all of you lawyers out there, get out and use your legal degree to help animals, but you don't have to be a lawyer to help animals and push for animal friendly legislation. It's really about staying abreast of what bills are out there and showing your support to legislators. There's some wonderful events every year. I would participate in the Humane Society's lobbying day at the Capitol in New York State. It's such a wonderful thing to be able to get together with other people who care about helping animals. And it makes such a difference to really show up and have meetings with your legislators. And of course, if you can't attend in person, sending them emails and letters, all of that stuff will really, it may feel like a small thing, but it ends up going a long way. I've heard people say that for every letter or phone call or personal visit, probably counts even more. Legislators tend to count that as that one person wrote. I will assume that 100 other people feel that way. So it just goes to show that your one little voice really can make a difference for animals.
Yeah, we can forget that we are one person, but there is all one people join. We have the power to make change. So yes.
Exactly.
What is it like to talk about animal rights with children? We talked a little bit about that in the beginning of our conversation today. But I wanted to know, like, if you had experience other than the book, maybe with your own kids, what is it like to talk about animal rights with kids?
You have to start, of course, from the perspective of using language and concepts that kids can understand. And kids absolutely understand the basic concepts that we're talking about, right? Good and bad feelings, not wanting to feel pain or hurt, and wanting to follow your dreams. And so I think for kids it can be really easy. And I've yet to meet a kid that doesn't love animals. I think it's such a basic innate quality that I think we're born with, and maybe unfortunately some of us lose along the way as we get older. But I think kids really are born with this innate connection to animals. And so in some ways it can be very easy. If you distill concepts down to the very basic things that they are, in Flaco's case, you know, telling his story in terms that children can understand. He was in a zoo in this little tiny thing where he couldn't fly, he couldn't be an owl, and then he got to be free. You can ask children, if you were Flaco, what would you want to do? Would you want to go back to the zoo because the zoo kept trying to catch him? Or would you want to stay free? And I think most kids would say, I want to fly free. And, it really lays bare for everyone, for adults, for children, that Flaco was a wild animal who was meant to be free. And I think that's a concept that would be very easily accepted by a child because they can understand it in terms of their own life. Kids don't have control over a lot in their own lives, right? I think they can relate really easily to the idea of having a dream and it being really hard to get something that you want, and you have to wait for it and be patient. But if you do those things, then hopefully one day you'll achieve that. There are, of course, some topics that are more challenging when we're talking about use of animals in food or animal testing. Those you have to know your own child and kind of what is age appropriate. But from a personal standpoint, I've started from a young age with my children. They are now 3 and 7. They will proudly tell you they don't eat animals because they love animals and don't want to hurt them. And that's also, I think, a very basic concept. It just goes back to the golden rule of, doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. I use examples just being out and about with them, don't chase the birds, speak nicely to the dog. Those are all, little things that might not seem like they make a big difference, but I think over time we'll build up and create this narrative in a child's mind of, well, yes, animals are part of my world and I should be treating them with the love and care that I treat others in my world.
It's almost as if what we were taught as children and what we teach children is not empathy. Like, it's the opposite of empathy. So empathy is something that comes easy to them. And it's not something that it's hard to explain why an animal has a right to be free and everybody has a right to be free. It's just because we as a society ingrain in children's minds the idea that certain animals are okay to eat and to abuse, that the problem is if they already have that idea in their brain. And then you have to introduce the idea, hold on, that's not the case. Well, if you start early and if you start already saying no, and every animal has a right to live their own lives, then it's not that unnatural. It's actually very natural.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm raising my kids to be vegan, but I understand and acknowledge that most of the world isn't. I mean, unfortunately, we're a small percentage of the world, and I hope that most people that buy my book are not necessarily people that are already vegan. I'm wanting to reach people that need to be reached, if you will. So, in a way, it's if you turn it on its head, I do think that most kids on their own. I mean, there's the funny quote, you give a baby a bunny and an apple, the baby will eat the apple and pet the bunny, not the other way around. It's kids innately, I think, love animals and wouldn't want to hurt them. And it's only later when, the concepts of food and what am I eating? What is this? I think that is an awkward conversation in a lot of families, more so than the conversation I have with my kids, where suddenly an adult is saying, well, yes, this is chicken and we eat chicken. But yes, there's also a picture of a chicken in your book and, that chicken is cute. So if you flip it on its head, I think it's more challenging to do that kind of to children, and that confusing just turn of events for them, where you have old McDonald's farm and you sing about them and love them, but yeah, then we turn around and eat them. I remember as a kid, I wasn't raised vegetarian or vegan, but I remember being really young when, I asked, like, what is this? What is this that I'm eating? And they're like, well, that's a burger. That's a dead, comes from cows. And, the questions would continue, but what do you mean? Like, and I remember even at a very young age just being horrified by that. And again, kids don't have a lot of choice. So
Yeah.
as for a 5-year-old, whatever I was, I said, well, okay, well, I guess that's what I'm eating. And it wasn't until later on, I was about 11 years old when I came home and said, no, I'm not doing this anymore. And I stopped eating it. I think with a book like this, I don't expect that it's going to turn every reader vegan necessarily. I would love for that to happen, but I do think we have to start in kind of bite-sized goals, right? The first goal, I think, is just to have kids be able to reconnect with their innate understanding that animals have feelings, and therefore I should care about an animal's feelings. I think gradually it should become self-evident, if you follow that concept, that a child will at one point question other things and hopefully become more aware of the plight and suffering of animals in other ways.
Yeah. You were talking about planting seeds. It's very much so. I also became vegetarian at a very young age, at 12, 13. And it was kind of a similar situation. I knew what it was. I was already feeling iffy about it. Like, I don't fully agree with this. But it was a children's book. It was a children's book that it's not a vegan book. It wasn't meant to turn children into vegans. But the way that they described an animal dying in that book really moved me. And because of all those seeds that had already been planted in my background, now I can see that. I was like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. And hopefully, this book can be one of those seeds and maybe the turning point for other people as well. So,
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, there's so many other beautiful books I can think of. I read growing up from, Black Beauty, Charlotte's Web. It's a wonderful book I just read the other night. I read to my daughter, called The Faithful Elephants, that just have stayed with me all these years. And they connected the simple concept of animals feeling it. I think it's such an important topic. I think there's a famous quote: teaching a child not to step on a caterpillar is as important for the caterpillar as it is for the child. And this links to, of course, the concept of humane education and the whole body of research that demonstrates that there is a real connection between cruelty to animals and cruelty and harm to people. And it's not just something I made up. There is a established body of research that shows this. If you look at data of serial killers, school shooters, notoriously violent people, they all, without fail, have a history of violence, starting with animals. Many situations with domestic violence, child abuse in the home, animal abuse is just woven in. It can be used as a measure of control in a relationship. Sometimes, if we're talking about a situation with child abuse and neglect, a lot of times it becomes, watch what's happening to the family pet. And that becomes a lesson of, if you don't behave, like, you're next, similar to domestic violence. So to me, again, it's, if we can help children adhere to this core concept of kindness, I really believe it gets to the roots of so many problems that we have in society. It's a topic close to my heart of trying to create more peace and love in a child's life, because it's not just about necessarily the animals in the situation, but the child and all relationships in the world. It's all connected.
Hi there, I'm Hope Bohannick, host of the Hope for the Animals podcast, sponsored by Compassionate Living. Join me on a journey to uncover the heartbreaking and heartwarming aspects of living vegan. My guests cover a variety of issues, but I like to focus on ethics, chickens and sanctuaries, the environment, anti-oppression activism, and the reasons for living vegan. If this sounds good to you, come check out the Hope for the Animals podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Do you believe and do you see Flaco's story as an inspiration for humans to be more vocal about birds' rights, animal rights?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Flaco really has created a legacy with his story. So many people can connect with the concepts of freedom. And in a way, he becomes kind of an ambassador for other animals, for people to be able to connect with him and his struggle. Once you do that, it becomes easy to open your eyes and your heart to the suffering of animals elsewhere. So for somebody who loved Flaco and was so happy to see him free, I hope that person will start to question, well, was the zoo the right place for Flaco? What are they doing at zoos? Like, why was Flaco stuck in this tiny exhibit his whole life? Is that right? The questions will just add on and add on. And yes, my hope is that it will kind of just open a window that will just get wider and wider. People can expand the circle of compassion to all animals.
Beautiful. And just for fun, my last question today is, you bring a lot of owl fun facts in the end of your book. What's your favorite?
I think my favorite is the owl's eyes can change colors, and it's based on their emotions, actually. So whether they are happy or scared, the color of their eyes can actually change. So again, linking back to emotions, to me, that's and they have such amazing eyes and body parts. It's really hard to pick, but I think that one is especially cool.
That's so magical. All right. Thank you very much for being here with us today, Christine. Before I let you go, do you have any messages, any particular projects you're working on, anything you'd like to share with our listeners? The stage is yours.
Well, thank you so much. Well, I'm excited. I have a couple of bookstore events coming up in New York City, one at the Corner Bookstore and one at the Greenlight Bookstore. And these will be fun story time events for children. And I'm partnering with World Animal Protection for one of the events at the Corner Bookstore and Plant Powered Kids at the Greenlight Bookstore. So we'll be serving up some yummy vegan snacks for kids and having some fun owl crafts. So if you are in New York, May 15th and May 18th, please come to these events. Otherwise, stay tuned. This is my debut book, but I am hoping to write more books in the future. So thanks so much for chatting with me today, Louisa. It was great to connect with you and chat about Flaco.
It was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Lantern Publishing and Media is devoted to sharing messages of compassion. Our books inspire a better world by telling the stories of animal rights activists, climate activists, and their fights for a world where everyone can live in harmony, no matter their species. Lantern is a 501c non-for-profit organization. Your donation helps us keep our work going. If you can, go to lanternpm.org/donate to help us with any amount. Once again, the website is lanternpm.org/donate. Your generous gift enables you to support our collective mission to inform, inspire, and educate. Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Christine Mott as much as I did. Thank you for joining us at Lantern Voices today. And don't forget, if you want to buy Freebird or any other book ever featured in Lantern Voices in ebook format, head over to our ebook store at lanternpm.org and use the coupon LanternVoices25 at checkout. The coupon is Lantern Voices, just like the podcast, and the numbers 2 and 5, all together, no spaces. That will give you 25% off your purchase. And thank you so much for joining us here today. Please leave us a 5-star review if you like the podcast. That really helps us reach more people. And please also consider giving us a follow on social media. We are at Lantern PM on Instagram, Lantern Publishing and Media on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and at Lantern PM Official on TikTok. We hope to see you again in 2 weeks for more Lantern Voices. See you soon!